Good evening and welcome to the public meeting for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications for the properties known as 19 Elm Street and 13 Mountain Street. Before we begin, I'd like to provide the land acknowledgement. Niagara Region and Grimsby are situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hadawandanrock, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the first Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and the town of Grimsby stands with all Indigenous peoples, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. The premise of this public meeting is to provide the opportunity for the public to provide input on the proposed application. I would like to stress that there have been no decisions or recommendations made by council or planning staff on these applications. A previous open house was held for this application on Monday, September 13th, 2021. This meeting is conducted in accordance with the town's procedural bylaw. All participants are asked to conduct themselves with decorum and respect, and provide the opportunity for all members of the public to express their opinions in an environment of tolerance on all points of view and free of intimidation. The intent is to create a venue to encourage people to participate in the process and provide their input. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Town of Grimsby to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the town of Grimsby before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is adopted, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the town of Grimsby before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is adopted, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party. With us this evening is Jasmine Froelich, Elsa Fincello, and Harvey Valentine, Castle Point Numa, Drew Sinclair, Aaron Budd, and Luke Karras, S&V Architects, Allison Shooter and Emma West, Bosefield, Philip Evans, and Emily Collins, ERA Architects, Stephanie Hards, and Madeline Katz, BA Group. Planning staff in attendance: Adam Jignick, Planner; Bianca Verrecchia, Heritage Planner; Walter Basic, Assistant Director of Planning. Tonight, we will start with staff providing a brief presentation outlining the process in the application. Next, the consultant team will provide an overview of the proposal, and that will be followed with an opportunity for you, the public, to ask questions. If you have not already done so, please ensure you have signed in so you will be informed of future meetings on this proposal. As we navigate the virtual public meeting, we ask all participants for your patience. Each participant will be called in order and will be provided 10 minutes to speak. Each presenter may speak only once. If you hear your comments presented by someone else, please do not duplicate the remarks. All of the comments are being recorded and will be taken into consideration. When you are called, we ask that you state your name and address. Persons addressing council shall confine their remarks to the business at hand and shall direct their comments or questions to the chair. Staff are taking notes of all the questions asked this evening, and at the end of the delegations, the consultant will be asked to respond to all the questions, comments raised. If you feel that your questions have not been responded to this evening, you can email our planning department at planning@grimsby.ca. Adam Jignack will now give a presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Thank you, Peter. Yep, so good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Jignack, and I'm a planner that is working for the town. I just wanted to thank you all for taking the time out of your schedules to join us tonight. So the project that we will be discussing tonight is a proposed zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment. Plan to be located at the current sites of 19 Elm Street and 13 Mountain Street, which currently contain the buildings known as Wolverine Hall and Wolverton House, respectively. So to begin this public meeting, I'll just be going through this presentation, providing everyone with some insight into the process of this application. And I'm also going to briefly introduce what is proposed for the site. So, and then the town's heritage planner, Bianca, will also be going over some heritage matters related to the property. We also have the project team from Castle Point Numa here, who, as well as some of their consultants, who are here to provide some answers and maybe address some concerns that you might have with the project. Following their presentation, there will be some time to ask questions or provide some concerns that you might have about the application. Next slide. So just to go over the purpose of the meeting tonight, we would like to provide you all with the overview of the planning process for the zoning bylaw and official plan amendments. So this includes the process from the start to the finish, what stage of the process that we're currently in. So an overview of the policy and regulatory framework will also be provided, including the relevant policies that are in place on the subject property. Agency feedback has also been provided in the staff information report that was attached with the agenda. And the applicant team is here and will provide you with some additional details about the proposal. And finally, give you the chance to answer some questions that you may have and gather some feedback. And this feedback would all be taken into consideration and identify any potential revisions that may need to be made to the project. Yep, so why can plans or bylaws change? So under the Planning Act, authority is provided to submit the applications for development plans that may not meet the current official plan or zoning bylaw. And the town's role in this process is to process these applications that come in. These applications are only able to amend the official plan or zoning bylaw if it is determined that the proposed changes comply with the overall intent of the official plan and any other regulatory framework. And the result of these changes is the development that is compatible with the surrounding area. So what you're seeing here is a flow chart that outlines some of the major milestones in the planning process. So an application for a zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment would be again with a pre-consultation meeting with town staff, relevant agencies. So this could include, and it's not limited to, the Niagara Escarpment Commission, the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, Grimsby Power, etc. So this meeting would outline the requirements that an applicant would need to submit as far as studies, plans, all those materials for these types of applications. So the pre-consultation meeting for 19 Elm and 13 Mountain Streets was held this past February. So once an application is ready, an applicant would submit the required documents and fees to the town for the town to review for completion. And upon the completion, a notice is sent out to agencies that are asked for comments. And the public is also able to provide comments at this time, as all of the materials would be posted either on the town's website or in this case, the Let's Talk Grimsby webpage. And all notices for public meetings or open houses would also be posted in these locations. So where we are is we're currently at the statutory public meeting stage, which provides an opportunity for comments to be made about the application. And at this stage, the initial agency and public comments have been made, with revisions potentially being done at this stage. Any revision would be made to the application to address any concerns from agencies, town staff, or members of the public. And after the public meeting, if all of the concerns have been met about the proposal, staff will prepare a recommendation report for council regarding the application, and a decision on the application will be made at a future council meeting with the opportunity to appeal the decision afterwards. And just one more additional note about the process is that this application process, this specific application is also undergoing site plan approval. So this site plan approval stage would capture more of the details of the project. So things like building materials and addressing the grading of the site. So we're at the zoning bylaw and official plan amendment stage, which more so covers the zoning related items. So your building setbacks, height, lot coverage, permitted uses on the site, and parking. Yeah, so the planning process is an open process, so it allows members of the public to have a say on an application. So this meeting is one of those opportunities to give your opinion on the application. And you can also write a letter or email to the planning department to provide comments. So the email is planning@grimsby.ca. You can also send a copy of your letter or email to counselors as an alternative. And this public meeting is not the last opportunity to provide comments, and comments will continue to be accepted until the staff recommendation report is completed. Yep. And so to stay informed about this application, you're invited to provide your mailing address to the planning department, which I believe many people here tonight have done so. So by doing so, you would receive any notice of future meetings, information on how to obtain the staff report, information about speaking in front of the committee, and information on how a decision on the application can be appealed. Moving on to the proposal, this slide just illustrates the proposed layout of the building, currently proposed as a 7-story mixed-use building with some amenity space provided. So the building would be incorporating most of the existing Wolverine House and Wolverine Hall into the design of the building itself. But the project team can provide a few more details about this proposal. This is just another slide showcasing a rendering of the building, the proposal, with this view facing eastward from Mountain Street. Again, these slides provide some more elevation views of the proposal. So again, the top image would be the eastward view from Mountain Street, and the bottom image would be the north-facing elevation view from Elm Street. So now to go through the official plan, the project's located within the downtown district and has a downtown intensification official plan designation. So this designation currently allows for a variety of different uses and currently permits a maximum height of 4 stories, although 6 stories may be considered by council with the submission of a visual impact assessment. The proposed official plan amendment would be to permit a maximum height of 7 stories. And for the zoning, the current designation is again downtown intensification with a site-specific policy in place currently on 19 Elm Street. So this site-specific policy currently permits additional uses, including custom workshops and garden centers, and has lessened parking and loading space requirements. The downtown intensification zoning permits a wide range of uses with a maximum height of 4 stories and 40% lot coverage currently. The proposed zoning is downtown intensification still, though with some site-specific policies proposed for the entirety of the subject site, so both 13 Mountain and 19 Elm together. The policy is proposed to permit additional uses of the community hub and dwelling units on the 1st story and a modified performance standards for the maximum height, minimum parking requirements, including non-exclusive use of visitor and non-resident spaces, front lot line, lot coverage, and other setback requirements. Relief from the provisions relating to step backs for each additional story and front entrances and building placements in relation to the front and rear lot lines are also being proposed. And the existing site-specific policies are proposed to continue, so specifically the one in place on 19 Elm Street. So now I'll turn it over to Bianca Verrecchia, our heritage planner, just for some information regarding the heritage.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Adam. As Adam mentioned, I am the heritage planner at the town, and I'll be providing you with a short presentation on the heritage-related comments associated with the site. It is of importance to note that the properties at 13 Mountain Street and 19 Elm Street have status under the Ontario Heritage Act and are protected under Section 27, which provides demolition control to the heritage resources on the subject site. The Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee has provided the following recommendation to Council, which supports the heritage recommendations presented by staff at both the open house and the Heritage Committee meeting. The overall heritage recommendations from both staff and heritage are as follows. I will note this is a fairly long recommendation, so please do bear with me as I read through the list. And I will note that the full recommendations are available within the staff information report within tonight's agenda. So resolved that it be noted that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee expresses concern with the height and massing of the proposed dwelling, and should council approve the development application, the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee endorses the following recommendations. Recommendation 1. The retention of the original circa 1880 building fabric of the Wolverine House and church building, and that the staff recommendation of the two structures, 13 Mountain Street and 19 Elm Street, be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that the town enter into an agreement with the applicant to designate these structures, and that the applicant agree to not object to the designation. Recommendation 2, that the committee supports the demolition of the carriage house because it does not merit designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and support the removal of the rear and side additions. Recommendation 3, that measured drawings of the carriage house and the various additions be submitted to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, and that professional photo documentation be conducted for both the carriage house as well as its placement within the surrounding landscape, and that these documents be shared with the archives for their records. Recommendation 4, that the salvage of materials occur to the greatest extent possible for both the carriage house and the additions. Recommendation 5, that a heritage conservation plan be submitted during the site plan phase of the application to address any potential disturbances to the heritage properties, including the following precautionary measures: construction hoarding, crack monitors, vibration monitors, and other conservation measures as needed. Recommendation 6, the restoration of both the Wolverine House and church building, including general masonry repair and cleaning, be conducted in accordance with best practices outlined within the future Heritage Conservation Plan. Recommendation 7, that the heritage conservation measures within the Heritage Conservation Plan be undertaken in accordance with best practices outlined within the standards and guidelines for the conservation of heritage places in Canada. Recommendation number 8, that access be provided to heritage professionals on staff to perform regular observation of all vibration and crack monitoring devices, as well as overall observation of the subject site. Staff will reference best practice and property standards during these observations. Recommendation 9, that financial securities be taken for the conservation of the heritage fabric, and that the restoration strategy be detailed within the Heritage Conservation Plan. Recommendation 10, that the proposed setback and proposed green space be maintained within the site plan phase of the application to ensure the reveal of as much of the heritage buildings as possible. Recommendation 11, that the top 2 stories of the proposed development be stepped back, and that the appropriate materials be used to help blend the modern layer into the established streetscape. Recommendation 12, that the finishes and materials be addressed during the site plan phase of the application in accordance with best practices in consultation with regional urban design staff. Recommendation 13, that if required, the applicant agree to an urban design review panel. Recommendation 14, that the applicant return to the committee with their commemoration plan, including the potential reintegration of significant materials of the carriage house. Staff and committee have thoroughly reviewed all materials pertaining to the heritage components of this application, and if the application is approved by council with the above mentioned heritage recommendations in place, the heritage of the 2 structures will be conserved through the proposed adaptive reuse of the buildings and affiliated proposal. That concludes our presentation, and I'll pass it back to you, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Adam and Bianca and the Town of Grimsby planning staff. Next, the Castle Point NUMA project team will give a presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I'm just in the process of updating the presentation. This will take 1 moment, but Harley Valentine from Castle Point will be speaking first, and I will be following him. So Harley.
Thanks, Drew. I think we're going to pull up slide 5. Thank you, Councillor, town staff, and the Grimsby community. Good evening. My name is Harley Valentine, and I'm a partner at Castle Point NUMA. Tonight, I am broadcasting live from the Wolverine Hall, home of the GBF Wellness Hub, which has been transformed for the annual Christmas Hamper program. I am delighted to be introducing this project at tonight's public statutory meeting because, as many of you know, I was born and raised in Grimsby and remain a committed member of this community. And with that, it gives me great pride that the Wolverton is designed to contribute 73 market rental apartments into the heart of downtown Grimsby. Downtown Grimsby has been a backdrop to my family for over 3 generations, and I'm humbled at the opportunity to continue that legacy with the delivery of the Wolverton. A quick agenda for a presentation. I provide a brief introduction of Castle Point. I'm joined by some of my incredible team members tonight, Elsa Fancello, Vice President of Planning and Development, and Jasmine, Associate Planner. Our site for the Wolverton is to bring residential, retail, and community spaces together into a vibrant mixed-use landmark site at the corner of Mountain and Elm. Castle Point Numa is a value-based development company that places community building, sustainability, and design excellence central to all our projects. Today, I am joined by an incredible project team, a group of professionals I'm honored to have with us tonight supporting the Wolverton development. It includes Aaron Budd, architect at SVN Architects, Luke Carries, landscape architect at SVN Architects, Emma West and Allison Shooter, our planners at Bousfields, Phil Evans and Emily Collins, our heritage consultants at ERA Architects, and Emily Hards and Madeline Katz, our transportation consultants at BA Group. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the floor over to Drew Sinclair, principal at SVN Architects, to take us through the Wolverton.
Thank you, Harley, and thank you, members of council, staff, and our neighbors in the town of Grimsby. So I want to acknowledge first that this presentation doesn't necessarily fit neatly into 10 minutes. So there's a few parts where I'm going to be moving fairly quickly, but I want to acknowledge the work that Adam's done in providing the overview of the planning for the site, and equally the work that Bianca did in providing the overview of the work we've done with the heritage planners within the staff. I'll speak to that later in the presentation. Very quickly, just to help you understand the starting point for designing or considering a building on the site, further to Bianca's comments, one of the, and if not the primary objective in imagining redevelopment of this property, imagining bringing new housing here, was to frame and to really improve the land surrounding and to celebrate in many ways the existing heritage buildings on the site. We're doing that in a number of ways. And I think first and foremost, most importantly, by maintaining those buildings nearly in full with 3 facades fully exposed and keeping them as they are today, the existing floors with new programming, and to further to some of what Bianca was mentioning, renewed approach to investment in materials. We're also doing that by introducing new celebratory plazas that both frame the buildings on the site, but create a really amazing new type of public space in the town of Grimsby, downtown, and then bringing new housing onto the site, but setting it back, allowing it to play kind of second stage at the rear of the site to the public spaces at the forecourt along Mountain and in the front on Elm.
Sorry, Drew, your slides aren't changing. Sorry. It's still static on the Castle Point slide.
Yeah, so it's on slide 5.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
That's good.
And Drew, sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to also let you know that I heard you make the comment that try to fit it in 10 minutes. You have more than 10 minutes. It's your presentation, so please make sure you articulate to the public everything you need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I also want to, though, just express how important it is to get feedback tonight and make sure there's a fair amount of time for everyone to provide comment. And some of this we've talked about before in the public open house. I already mentioned our starting point, the 3 principles driving the organization of the site: maintaining the heritage buildings, creating a celebratory public space, and moving the new apartments inward on the site to make sure those spaces are primary and central in providing that public amenity. But the design development principles that were brought to us by Castle Point and by Harley and his team at the front end of this exercise were these: that we continue, that this project is a continuation of investment in the site and neighborhood, providing both public spaces, but also program spaces, integrating spaces that are in need within the community, but most importantly are accessible to the public, that the restoration of the buildings, the regeneration of the historic fabric of the downtown core is a critical part of this project. And the connectivity that currently exists across the site, through the site, and in and out of the buildings is not just maintained, but augmented. We're maintaining a contextual approach to development in exactly the language that Bianca was using with regards to the celebration of the historic materials of the site. That's a central part of our agenda in entering the design of this project and designing from the ground up, thinking about how great open spaces can shape housing and are not maybe the victim of housing as it comes onto sites like this. We're celebrating landscape first. More than anything, and responding to context, understanding there's a long history along Mountain and Elm on this site. These buildings have been here for a century, and that they will play an important role in the future of the downtown, and that needs to be an important part of our story as well. The buildings, as we've already spoken about, Wolverine House and Wolverine Hall. Further, as all of you are familiar with, there's a dramatic, we'll call it environmental driver that we have to be considerate of as we're considering development in the downtown core. The backdrop to this development is the escarpment, a mountain street as it rises up out of the downtown to the south, as it steps up the escarpment moving towards the south. And we understand how this site sits into the heart, really the triangular heart of Grimsby's core, really created by Mountain, Elm, and Main Street to the north. What we've spent a good amount of time doing is trying to understand how this site fits into the existing fabric, how within thinking about really a 500-meter walking radius, imagine that as a 5-minute walking radius for the site, the confluence of supportive amenities that will provide for really living well and thriving in the community we're proposing on this site, but also trying to imagine what missing elements exist within this downtown core that this development can contribute towards. Understanding the historic fabric that's really reinforced by the planning policies that Adam already spoke to, historic Main Street, with an intent through the planning policies to really reinforce the character and the retail focus and activity that exists there. It's a historic Main Street, not just named Main Street. It is really the historic Main Street of Grimsby. And Mountain Street, which has always played a very different role. It's about connecting the community to really lake to escarpment to tablelands beyond. And, in the broader region, I mean, Mountain Street, as all of you know, plays both a very important role and an ongoing challenging role in the life of the downtown because it's a major conduit for moving people. And we acknowledge that. I think a lot of the comments in the open house acknowledge that directly. And Elm Street is something very different. It's a hybrid street in that it includes both commercial and residential spaces. And an important part of our work is making sure that the development fits, that it provides those transitions necessary. A few views around the site. I think most of us are familiar with the views along Elm Street, along Main Street, up on the right, and of course the site itself that Adam showed earlier. I'm going to walk you through a series of drivers, and I think I'll focus the presentation here, Councillor Ritchie, because these are some new images that others wouldn't have seen. As I mentioned before, really thinking about the two existing heritage buildings on the site as not just part of the fabric of the larger and surrounding community, but the defining elements of this property and this development on the whole. We're trying to celebrate them in a number of ways, as I mentioned, keep really 360 degrees of those buildings intact, keeping the interior spaces of those buildings intact, and then bringing new programs and we'll call them augmentations, sort of celebratory architecture to the surroundings so that they are newly accessible and usable by the community, imagining hospitality programs and community programs in the historic Wolverine House and Wolverine Hall. In order to achieve and make sure they maintain their prominence on the site, all development, new development has been held back a full 22.5 meters, or about 70 feet from the existing Mountain Street, the road right of way. This is important for a number of reasons. One, it makes sure the buildings play a very prominent role in defining the site, but it also makes sure there's a really ample, really excellent amount of public realm or public space in front of the buildings that serves three functions, to celebrate the buildings, to allow for the reading and really the landscape to surround the historic structures. But it also assures a new public space that will be animated with amenity. I'll speak to that in a moment. And perhaps equally, Mountain Street in a lot of ways is a somewhat hostile condition. It's a busy street. There's a lot of traffic on the street. We understand movement is underway to move a lot of the heavy truck traffic off Mountain to move it to Bartlett. But immediately in the near term, we understand how important it is to provide enough amenity pedestrian space off the street and new plantings and new landscape that actually creates a safer public space and a more hospitable public space away and along Mountain Street, really in a lot of ways humanizing this portion of mountain as you come off the escarpment and move north into the town, where today it provides, and I think the sense is that there's a lot of risk and a lot of exposure. One of the concerns raised in the open house was about parking, was about traffic, transportation movement. What we're endeavoring to do is to assure that all parking on the site is fully enclosed within the structure itself. A full 2.5 levels of below ground parking are being proposed, and loading is interior to the site at the rear of the property. When I get to the plan, I'll show you where the entry point is into both the loading and the parking. I'm very close to where the existing entry point is to the Wolverton House site. A little bit further north, just north of the Wolverton House, we're proposing to maintain that and actually provide driveway access to the underground on the north side of the site here. Again, you can see a more or less accurate depiction of how the grade rises from north to south across the Mountain Street frontage. The loading and parking entrance, as I mentioned, on the north side of the building, but I think most importantly, as I mentioned in my introduction, what we're trying to do as well is maintain some of the public function that exists on the site today. There is existing connectivity between Mountain Street and the Balsam Lane, both the parking pad, the LCBO, but also the pedestrian connections, the 2 pedestrian connections that exist to Main Street from Balsam Lane. And I think this has been a large and heavily used public amenity for many years. So what we're trying to do, both on the east side and on the north side of the project, is make sure there are public walkways that allow for traversing the site and moving down towards the Balsam Lane, accessing Balsam Lane, and ultimately finding that alternative route through to Main Street. We want to ensure that the building isn't a large mass on the site, that it's stepping and transitioning as it moves towards element, it moves towards massing. What we've done prior to and since the open house is really spend a lot of time understanding how the articulation of the building can impact its reading offsite, both its visibility, but also the shadows it casts. And so you can see we had introduced, and we've articulated further a number of the steps, and so that the reading of the building along Elm Street is a much lower building, and then there's a series of gardens as it terraces back from the street, and a series of projections and terraces on the Mountain Street elevation as well, so that we can change materiality as it moves down towards the heritage buildings, and we can also really reduce the impact of the visibility of the taller portion of the apartment building as it steps back to the east. Again, as I mentioned, maintaining that connectivity in Grimsby, I think, is important, or to Main Street, is really important for Main Street. The downtown intensification policies and the intensification zoning that's in place on the site was intended to deliver people to drive Main Street and really support the productivity, the animation, the commerce that takes place on Main Street. It needs people, and it benefits from people who are walking, not driving. And so part of the intent here is to create housing that's close to, that's walkable, not just to Main Street, but to the suite of services that are within the 5-minute radius that I showed earlier in this presentation. It's part of council's vision for the site as described within the official plan and the zoning. And a lot of what we're trying to achieve is bring those units online, bring a sufficient quantity to be able to afford the retention of the heritage buildings. It's a really important part of this proposal, is to do not too much, just enough to afford a really successful adaptive reuse of the 2 heritage buildings in a manner that we can keep them in full, but also to bring new bodies on the site, residents into the community that will use Main Street in a really productive and active way. A couple of very practical items, and I think in this, it's really important to note that the pink and the blue denote community, really public entrances into the project. To the north, Wolverton House proposed for adaptive reuse. In the same way it's been used historically as potentially hospitality, retail, new commercial uses, and Wolverton Hall as a new community hub, providing the kind of function that's taking place there now. You can see, if any of you have Harley on your screen, Harley in the space today, surrounded by the work of the Grimsby Benevolent Fund, a use and a partnership we anticipate carrying on in the building, upon the completion of this. That this is really an amazing and active space today, and it will continue to be so, albeit with the benefit of some new investment in things like a new community kitchen and some additional multifunction spaces. I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker because they're very familiar. I've referred to at a high level what we're trying to achieve here. The landscape and the public realm approach is fairly straightforward. We're providing 2 anchor public spaces An outdoor amenity pavilion at the back, accessible via what we're calling a residential muse, front doors onto a small laneway that connects back to the primary outdoor amenity space at grade on the east side of the development, providing both a buffer from Balsam Lane, but also a really excellent place for native plantings and small gardens. A large public plaza fronting onto Mountain Street, acting as, again, a buffer space, a publicly accessible landscape that brings people off and away from Mountain into this celebratory space, providing the dual function of both celebrating these heritage buildings and animating these uses interior. And then a new set or basically landscape trees. Today, you'll see there are some trees, there's some planting along Mountain Street, but it's largely devoid of really excellent mature tree foliage. So a large part of what we're doing, and we will work in concert with the town through our site plan process to provide a program for new planting, both along Mountain Street and Elm Street. So when you see the building, you see it through really through the screen of vegetation that's being proposed in these two locations. We'll show some images to that in a moment. Of course, the major community hub, some of the things we're looking at and thinking about: Artscape Young Place in Toronto, Wohn Project Co-op in Vienna. I mean, two big city examples of where spaces like this work really well. And I think all of you are familiar with the kind or class of space like this from churches throughout Grimsby, from some of the other public spaces that are used in the way the Wolverine Hall is being used today. And I mean, this is the future of that venue. Moving around the building 360 degrees on the left-hand side, and these, I have some blown up views. I won't dwell on these, but just to highlight the locations: Mountain Street looking south, really from the northwest corner of the site. A straight on Mountain Street perspective that would be a hard one to see because it's really taken from within the lot across the street, but it gives you that sense of relationship between the historic buildings. And then of course, a view from Elm Street looking north along Mountain Street that really shows the relationship between Wolverine Hall, the primary entrance, the community hub, and the proposed apartments. And then that view enhanced, give you a sense of what the street tree planting program will be, the screening from Mountain Street, the opportunity to bring pedestrians away from Mountain to really soften that landscape, creating an amenity really for the surrounding community as much as the residents on the site, and then the two largely publicly programmed spaces. That same view now blown up, obviously, with the Elm Street planting, the plaza we're proposing within the setback of Wolverine Hall from the intersection of Mountain and Elm, and this really wonderful, I'll call it a folded entrance where we're introducing wood into the language of stone and brick in order to really celebrate the new entrance into Wolverine Hall, into the community hub, with some of the new interior programs, service spaces, and community kitchen shown in behind. A new view that many of you won't have seen before of the plaza, really animated on all three sides. The secondary entrance into Wolverine, the Wolverine Hall program. And this is important because we anticipate that this will be not just a public plaza, but it'll also be a program space where a lot of what goes on in Wolverine Hall will have the opportunity of extending and really moving out into here, providing high level of animation. Some of the interior amenity space and what we're hoping will be an operable facade that really extends the feel of indoor-outdoor here. Again, an amenity space we're anticipating being primarily for the residents of the new community, but also potentially an extension of some of the public programming taking place within Wolverine Hall. And then what we would love to be a new hospitality venue, maybe a new cafe or something that would really anchor the northern edge of the plaza, taking advantage of the really amazing space existent within Wolverine House. So just to very quickly give you an overview of some of the technical studies that were submitted to the town. All of this information is available in more detail through the town. And of course, the point of contact for that would be Adam. A lot of this information is also available through the website that's been established for this project. And I'll speak to that in a moment. What's shown in each of these sun shadow studies, this is a snapshot of the sun shadow study that we submitted. We did include sun shadow studies for each time of the year, both equinox and solstice, also December 21st and June 21st. What's shown in red is the as of right permissions for the site, which currently would allow for a 4-story development that would hug the perimeter of the site. The blue is the shadow impacts of the proposed development, and dark blue is the footprint of the apartment. In light blue, you can see the existing heritage buildings on the site. So you get a sense of the minimal impacts resulting from the additional height beyond the current OP and zoning approved 4 stories. This doesn't include for the additional 6. I want to note that we have completed the visual impact study and gained sign-off from the Niagara Escarpment Committee on the visual impact assessment, and I'll speak to that in a moment. But as was mentioned by Adam, through the VIA process, there is the possibility of council approving 6 stories as of right. So we have not tested that within this. I think it's important to note, even though there has been an acceptance or approval of the VIA. The VIA, what it did was define a series of vantage points where we had to test the impacts of this development on views towards the escarpment. This was reviewed and approved, ultimately accepted by the Niagara Escarpment as having a minimal impact on the identified predominant views. We also conducted a pedestrian wind impact to understand how bringing a new taller 6 to 7 story residential building towards the rear of the site would impact pedestrian conditions. What's shown in green are conditions that are suitable for sitting or recreating. What's shown in yellow are conditions that are suitable for movement or kind of short-term recreating or sitting. This doesn't take into account the impacts of landscape or vegetation. And our understanding is that really the proposed development has very little impact on the wind conditions on the site. So further to the story I was telling earlier about the public realm, all of the spaces surrounding the building will be wonderful, comfortable places on days when it's not blustery and 80-kilometer-an-hour winds like it is today. So on normal days, non-windy days, this will be a wonderful place to sit outside. We have our team from ERA here tonight. They won't be speaking during my presentation, but just to say we've been working very closely with the town and the region on a response to the heritage requirements. And I think we're coming into a place, and I think we're generally, at this stage, compliant, but I suppose more importantly, generally in an agreement on a path forward in order to celebrate and conserve the heritage attributes of the buildings on the site. And it's been a really excellent working process that we can speak to if there are questions that come up later on. Site servicing, a kind of placeholder side, simply to say we're going to do a more fulsome proposal for how the site will be serviced in its exact way during the site plan phase. But at this phase, the test is really to determine the services that exist on the site to assure they're satisfactory for the density proposed, but also they don't take away from the future capacity of the site surrounding. And this is just to say that I don't believe we have our civil team that there is more than sufficient capacity for this building and the future density that's anticipated within the land use designations for the surrounding lands. And an important part of our work, again, is to focus on sustainability, to make sure that this building is not just delivering housing, that it's also moving the town of Grimsby a step towards a decarbonized or a post-carbon future. I mean, that begins for us with an understanding of materials, their embodied energy. But when it moves into more detailed design, we're going to be exploring things like green roofs, the deep landscaping strategy for the site to assure that stormwater stays on the site. We're not taxing municipal systems. We've already begun to investigate how our facades can play a role in really reducing energy use within the building. It's a really critical part of our SVN's approach to architecture, and it's really something we've embraced with Castle Point, is an enhanced approach to decarbonization within the realm of this project, trying to move this towards an absolutely carbon positive solution when it comes to energy and sustainability and low embodied energy solutions. We've taken a very innovative approach to the floor plates to make sure they're thin, they're shallow, so the interior spaces will be, for the large part, day lit and naturally ventilated year round. And then, of course, as I mentioned, low carbon building materials are a critical part of this. And our landscape team has been working diligently to try to identify both drought tolerant plant and tree species for the site, but more than anything, native plant and tree species that are really native to the lower bench and the lower portion of the escarpment in this area and in Grimsby and the Niagara region. So just to recap a couple of key points, our starting point was the buildings that exist there on the site and trying to find an adequate way of celebrating them, both for the purpose of creating a great building and space it, but also to create an amenity for the town and to create a better condition today along Mountain Street, just north of Elm. What results from the approach we've taken with regard to holding the apartment building back is a result in really exceptional public gathering green space between the public Wolverton House program of a cafe or hospitality venue and Wolverine Hall, which will continue to be a community hub or will become a renewed community hub program in the redevelopment. We believe we're playing a significant role in moving the town towards and the region towards meeting their downtown intensification objectives as edified within the current official plan and zoning. We're adding new housing with a very high walkability score. And what that means is it's playing a major role in bringing new or existing people relocating within Grimsby closer to downtown, which removes cars from the street and puts more bodies on Main Street, which is very important. And providing a mix of residential, retail, and community uses that are really fundamental and important for the site moving forward. So that concludes our presentation. I mentioned earlier that a lot of the materials, the technical review that the town's conducted, the materials that supported that technical review are available through either the town or by contacting us. You can reach us at grimsby@castlepointnuma.ca, and we do have a project website where we are receiving feedback out of this formal process via the wolverton.ca as well. So we encourage you to visit the site, and if you have further comments, to provide them in that forum. Thank you, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Harley, Drew, and Castle Point Numa project team for your presentation. We're now going to move forward to members of the public. I will be calling upon each member one by one. I have a list here in front of me. And just a reminder that our staff here are taking notes, and they'll be writing all the questions down. And at the end of all the public comments, we will then proceed to answer your questions. So first we have Carrie Rannick, I believe. If you could state your name and your address, and then your statements. So sorry, that's.
Sorry, I'm just at a. Oh,
yep, go ahead. Sorry.
Time to speak, or?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just out at a restaurant. I'm just going to walk away so it's not so noisy. My name is Carrie Rymack. I'm the owner of the H&R block at 13 Mountain Street in the Wolverton House. And I've had the pleasure of working with Harley over the last few years. I moved in there in 2019, and he's just been phenomenal and with the growth and helped me move on and grow my own business, as well as support the community of Grimsby. And I just wanted to reiterate, I had put up a statement in to the city or to the town of Grimsby, but I just want to continue to say that Harley has been with the group and continues to be very supportive in all the needs for myself as well as the community of Grimsby. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Next, we have Stacey Ilya. If you could state your name and your address and your comments, please.
Good evening, Councillor Ritchie. It's Stacey Ilya. I'm Chief Executive Officer of GBF Community Services at 40 Elm Street, Grimsby. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight, this evening, with regards to the Wolverton located at 13 Mountain and 19 Elm Street, the build of Castle Point Numa build. I provided a letter of endorsement for the Wolverton build at 13 Mountain Street and 19 Elm Street. The GBF Board of Directors and myself as Chief Executive Officer welcomed the prospect of a more diverse, prosperous downtown environment in Grimsby. The economic arguments for this build are strong, but we feel there are other crucial factors that support this build and warrant serious consideration. GBF has a long history of caring for the well-being of this town known as Grimsby, and it's a beautiful town. Our current location, both at 40 Elm Street and the Wellness Hub at 19 Elm Street, geographically position us to provide our wellness promotion service in the heart of Grimsby. As a social enterprise, we see ourselves as a business that promotes wellness in our town. With the support of donations from generous residents and thriving businesses, GBF can continue to grow and provide important social services that is essential to our community. This has been overwhelmingly demonstrated during the COVID-19 epidemic. We have shown that we are there when people need us most, but going forward, we can't do this without the continued support of a thriving town. Harley and his team has given us this wonderful opportunity of providing us with the space for a wellness hub in the downtown core. It has brought so much awareness to GBF, not only through the Grimsby town, but surrounding areas and Niagara region. So thank you, Harley. GBF Community Services has been providing financial assistance to low-income households for several years. In 2016, GBF had invested over $1 million in housing supports in Grimsby. But what people may not know is that many seniors, families, and couples who were living within their means as recently as a year ago have run out of options. Again, I say ran out of options. For them, every housing need is now challenging. We believe that short-term setbacks shouldn't have lifelong consequences. For each of us, our home provides a foundation for our well-being. It's the place where we spend the majority of our time, where we take refuge, and where we should feel safe. Homes are anchors in our local community. They are the basis for safe and secure neighborhoods that benefit us all. While we continue to advocate for affordable housing in Grimsby, due to COVID and increasing demands, our immediate focus is to increase awareness about how important it is to fill the current housing needs gap and ultimately prevent homelessness. GBF Community Services is doing its best to address this need. We currently provide monthly rent supplements to approximately 70 households in this community. That is an investment of $20,000 a month in this town. However, we are aware that there are limited options for those seeking housing in Grimsby. Harley Valentine is committed to bringing rental housing opportunities to Grimsby. Keep in mind, those who are affected by the lack of affordable housing are the same people who contribute to our otherwise healthy, diverse, and prosperous neighborhoods. Our downtown area has an important and unique role in economic, social, and affordable housing development. It has the opportunity to create a critical mass of commercial, affordable residential, cultural, and civic activities, all concentrated in our downtown location. We believe this concentration facilitates business, cultural exchange, and a pathway to both prosperity and well-being. Our downtown needs to belong and be shared by everyone. We welcome the opportunity to discuss our endorsement of this project. We have a passion for supporting a community that enables everyone to be well. The Wolverton build would be a positive contribution to this impact in this community. It would bring rental opportunities to those seeking housing in Grimsby. Providing your neighbors with safe and secure housing will help to make Grimsby a more inclusive, more diverse, and more resilient community. More than that, it will demonstrate that a community we really do care. The definition of affordability is a unit for which rent does not exceed 30% of gross annual household income for low and moderate income households. Most of those households we are servicing are paying 75% of their source of income towards rent. There is a need to continue to diversify the housing stock, including apartments, as well as family-sized dwellings to attract younger households aged 25 to 45 years, while allowing seniors aged 65 plus to age in a place they choose. Rental housing fulfills a number of important roles in the housing market in a community. It offers a flexible form of accommodation, provides relief from day-to-day maintenance, and often provides more modest-sized units. In addition, rental housing is generally more affordable compared to ownership housing. In most cases, rented dwellings tend to have lower monthly costs and only require first and last month's rent as a deposit. The flexibility and the affordability of rental housing is ideal for many households, such as seniors wishing to downsize, or those who are on fixed incomes, young adults starting their careers, or people living alone. Housing costs is one of the largest monthly expenditures for many households in Grimsby. The availability of adequate and suitable housing is a pressing concern for many individuals and families. On a weekly basis, I would like you to know that I am receiving 10 plus inquiries for housing support in Grimsby. Many of these calls are around displacement of properties because they're being sold right now. I also would like to mention that there is an 8+ year waiting list for the ability to enter into Niagara Regional Housing if approved. In Grimsby, we only have senior affordable housing, no options for individuals, and no options for families. While households with low incomes are most likely to experience housing challenges, increasing housing costs and rents throughout Grimsby and surrounding areas have also made the cost of shelter an issue for many households with moderate incomes. We all need a secure place to call home. We currently service very differently with regards to homelessness, as we are very close to 2 cities that are experiencing homelessness rapidly. That's very concerning for this agency, especially in frontline. So again, I welcome the ability to have rental available in the downtown core. Our goal at GBF is to continue to advocate and financially support households in Grimsby in need of stable housing options, but options are needed. Again, options are needed and they're not there now. It's been approximately 50 years since a purpose rental unit has been brought or built in our community. This development is about building rental units, but ultimately it's about building a community that is safe, inclusive, and offers economic opportunity for all. Those who cannot afford a house can still find a home with this build. This is purposeful rental building in the downtown core. This is the impact of rental apartments that we may not totally understand at this point, but I assure you, we need to really consider this. Having a different housing option is a sign of a healthy, vibrant community. Different needs, different stages of life mean different home requirements. Currently, sufficient rental housing is the missing middle of this downtown core. This purpose rental build will provide security of rental options for long-term security for many years. Community space in the downtown is essential to social cohesion. Public outdoor gathering spaces in downtown are also desirable to complete a downtown community. We strongly encourage this council to endorse this opportunity. Many generations ahead of all of us will benefit. This is a meaningful opportunity for our town. In fact, we see housing as being a key to many of the multiple facet issues we face as a community. Strong partnerships with Harley and his team is something that we are extremely grateful for, and it has given us as an agency great opportunities to continue the great work that we do. And we are committed to continue to advocate for the importance of rental units in this downtown core. We wish Harley nothing but the best, and we look forward to this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey. As I go through the names on the list here, I want to apologize now if I mispronounce your name. Next, we have Torrin Fee.
All right. Well, that's going to be hard to follow up after Stacey. So, my name is Torrin Fee. I'm actually a realtor here in town. I'm with the Lynn Fee team. Lynn is here as well. I've been a realtor actually in town for over a decade, and I've actually lived here my entire life, minus a couple of years when I went to school. But I find myself in a unique situation because I can feel that I'm in a unique spot, having rented for most of my life actually, and only just finally getting into the housing market last year after having a fairly successful real estate career. This only just goes to show where the rental market is currently right now, and that was last year when things were still normal. This type of situation that Harley and his team are bringing forward is something that's really brought a lot of attention to myself and my team. I won't speak for Lynn right now because I know she'll have things to say, but we find so many people, the same way that Stacey does, that come into us looking for affordable rentals that we can't help them with. There is nothing affordable any longer, we find, especially in the Grimsby area. And so we're unfortunately having to send people away into St. Catharines, Welland, Port Colborne, different areas that doesn't work for them. They live here because they want to work here. And so that was why when we were reached out to from Harley and we were told about this opportunity at the Wolverton and how it was going to work and the way that the programs they were going to do, I knew that this was something that we would have to embrace and jump on. So not only do I feel that the downtown itself needs to be revitalized in general, which this is going to do, but it's going to also bring that affordable rentals, the safe rentals, rentals that are not going to be owned by, in some cases, unscrupulous landlords, people who have never lived in our area, who maybe don't care about our area, people who don't care about somebody who can't afford anything but rent. So we need proper rental, and that is what is missing from Grimsby. We have too many investor-owned units right now. So I know that I have no vested interest really in rental units, being in real estate, but I know from being a renter for many, many years that this is something that we need. So I am in full support of the Wolverton, and I do appreciate this opportunity to be able to make my comments today in front of all of you. I feel that the housing crisis really is something that's impacting our quality of life in this community, and I look forward to seeing what more the Wolverton has to do. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Torrin. Next on the list is Carlo Zanin. If you could state your name and your address, please, before your comments.
My name is Carlo Zan. Hi, my name is Carlo Zan, and I own 21 Elm Street, directly next door to the property that's going up. At this point, it's more of an informational session for me, and I guess I'm going to withhold any comments to a future date. So that's all I want to say about this property and this unit that's going up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlo. Next, we have Kevin Ludded-Husen from, if you could state your name and your address, please.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
It's a family-owned business down Harmony Jewelers. We've been downtown since 1975. Grimsby's been very good to my family. It's been a great place to work. The kids and the family, just amazing. I love the development. I think it's great for downtown. I love the intensification. Harley and his team has put a lot of effort and focus on making this a real friendly place. And I think if it does go through, it'll be great for downtown Grimsby and the community. Struggling with the 7 stories and the size of it, being the first one on the block in downtown. But my biggest concern is parking and traffic with the pedestrian access to the Balsam Lane parking lot. I'm really concerned that you'll have working families that need additional parking for trucks and trailers, and the underground parking is great, but the parking downtown Grimsby is already overburdened drastically, and I'm very concerned about that. I think Harley and his team have some plans to address some of these concerns. So I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say about that, and looking forward to seeing how the team moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next, Lacey Horn, if you could state your name and your address, please.
I am Lacey Horn. I am attending as well from Harmony Jewelers. I'm a recent partner in the business. So my future is set in downtown Grimsby. And I too, I think Harley's development is great for the downtown. I think more developments like this in the downtown would be amazing. That mix of living and working and shopping downtown is a great thing. But I too share the same concerns with parking. I do feel it's an issue. We hear it from our customers. And I am concerned with the traffic flow as the development is being built, some of the short-term pains that may come with that. and maybe what can be done to rectify those problems as the development is coming underway. And also just the long-term effects in the parking, I do hope are looked at, and that's something that I would mirror to voice today. But I do think the development is a great thing for the downtown. I just hope that those concerns are addressed.
Thank you, Lacey.
Thank you.
Next, we have Danielle Parks. If you could state your name and address, please. Do we have Danielle Parks here?
Oh, she's not with us tonight.
Great, thank you very much. We'll move to the next person on the list. Donna Butler, if you could state your name and address, please, for your comments.
My name is Donna Butler, and I'm at 11 Main Street, downtown Grimsby. I have been here for pretty well 30 years. I have been in business 43 years. I'm very attached, obviously, to Grimsby. And I find myself wishing that everybody would understand we are probably in the most wonderful situation. We're the entrance to the fastest growing, most desirable entrance to Niagara, wine country, Niagara Falls, the deal. And we're right here sitting, pretty much asleep up until now. I'm very excited to hear about the building that must take place on Mountain and Elm Street. We need people downtown. It affects us emotionally. It affects our real estate if we're in a ghost town. The town has to come alive. It only comes alive with people. People moved here because they believed in their location. We must give them everything they need to keep them off the over popular Queenie. That's how they go to business. And when they get home, it'd be nice if they have a wonderful place to come home to. And that's up to us. And we need people, and we need them downtown. Life is about timing. We're on the right path. Change is ongoing, and we must change Grimsby. We have it all here. We have Lake Ontario, we have the escarpment, we have the entrance to the most exciting part of Canada in a lot of ways. The more I've been watching, studying all the restaurants, wineries, it's all here. And we are the entrance. And I'm very happy to be able to join this meeting, because it's very important that we have people downtown Grimsby. When people live in a large community, and when they have to go shopping, to a restaurant or to a wedding, they figure out where to park and how to get themselves there. When they park at a major mall, they're walking a lot farther than all our parking opportunities that are already here in Grimsby. And that's a non-issue in my mind. If you want to go someplace, you're going to get yourself there. And evolution is inevitable, and we all get to go through the going through. And this is our time to make Grimsby come alive. And I thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donna. Next, we have Teresa Loach. If you could state your name and your address.
Oh, hi.
If
I get to do this too?
If
All
you
right.
want to, yeah.
Yeah, Teresa Loach. I'm at 11 Main Street West. I manage Donna's Boutique. We have 2 locations here in Grimsby as well as Stony Creek, which also has their issues because of location. But I'll tell you, I love this little town and I love the people, and we want to see more people come and shop in our little boutiques. And there's a lot of beautiful little places to come and see and eat and shop. And we are very excited about this new adventure that's going on. And Donna and I really would like the penthouse. Okay, just saying. So keep that in mind. But thanks so much for everything. Appreciate you having us on.
Thank you, Teresa. Next, we have Lynn Fee. If you could state your name and address, please. You're still muted there, Lynn. Sorry.
Thank you. How are you? My name is Lynn Fee. I'm going to read. It just makes it a little bit easier. I put this together because I thought it would be better than rambling. I've lived and I've worked here in Grimsby for 36 years. Half of those years have been in real estate. I raised my family here, and I think some of you might know that I care very much about Grimsby. I've been a contributing member of the community through the support of social and charitable causes. And I really do believe that, you know, being an active supporter of healthy and sustainable town and contributions like the downtown are important. And just for the record, I guess it's important to say that I do provide my support of this development, the Wolverton. And I'd like to share with you why. Currently, the housing crisis is impacting all of us. And we've heard that from Stacey, you heard that from my son, Torin. Having looked at how things have changed and become even more critical right now, one of the things I notice more and more is that our own citizens here in Grimsby are struggling. And we know there's all kinds of people struggling. You hear it all the time. But when those people that are long-term residents are trying to downsize or just change it up and are worrying a little bit about their futures, there's not much we can offer them anymore. They can't really downsize. And when we try to find them any sort of rental opportunity, it's just not available. And we're not just saying that. We make relationships with people when we do business, at least I do. And it's hard to say to folks that, you know, we really can't provide them anything here in Grimsby anymore that's going to be able to help them. So as Torin mentioned, we're looking for them outside of the area. And this is more than just housing issues. It's like people just want to be able to rent, or they'd like to be able to buy. But when they can't buy, if they could at least rent something nice and be in the downtown core where they could actually walk to all the things they love. And anyone who's been here for 35 or more years, or even not, who's fallen in love with Grimsby like I have, the idea that you won't be able to do that anymore, they'll rent before they'll go and buy in St. Catharines or Welland. And that's what I think is attractive to me about this development, is for a lot of people, they are willing to sell that big old home, let's say, but they want to stay close. This is their comfort, and we're not able to provide. So this project is that. And I think the Wolverton makes a significant contribution to that. I know there's some concerns about height and things like that. I look at it and I see a beautiful place, actually. And I see what my mature sellers and buyers keep asking for. Is there somewhere close to town? Is there something with one floor? Is there something where I might be able to get around when I'm not able to drive anymore, or I don't want to drive, or, you know, my knees are not great. And it's so ideally situated. But more importantly, I think it gets you to everything that's important in our town. And like we've heard people say, you don't have to go anywhere then. And I think we have a great downtown core with restaurants and shopping, and people aren't taking advantage of it. And this brings us all back here again. So I feel like I'm pretty knowledgeable about that. I do support responsible growth, I'm not a fan of the big, ugly high rises, and we won't even go there. I don't want to see our town look ugly, and I don't see that as ugly. I see it, what I'm seeing is really carefully crafted combination of historic and kind of cool. And I have a historic building on Main Street that I own, my real estate center, and I live in a fairly humble home just behind the hospital where I've been for 35 years. So I kind of can get both sides of it. And I mean, this location has been zoned for density, I understand, and the application fits. And I just think to myself that this is, you know, a great opportunity for us to show up and be more than even what we are. And we are really something. I mean, people who come and ask me from Burlington or wherever, and I'll say, when they give me a price range, I'll think, no, it's not going to be Grimsby. I'll go, how about Beatonsville? How about Smithville? They go, no, we want to live in Grimsby. So people love our town. They really do. And it's really kind of heartbreaking when I tell them that maybe that's just not going to be for them. So to have a rental opportunity, which some folks are still hesitating about, but when you show them a beautiful opportunity like that, you know, I just think our residents, the ones we have had here, I'm talking about people who've been here longer than me, they're capable, hardworking people, and they're really struggling when they have to leave our town. So simply said, the rental housing is missing in Grimsby. And I just think the key here is our downtown core. We got good people here doing great things, and I think they would appreciate it as well. They like to walk, and over time, I think I see the Wolverton strong commitment. I've come to know these folks. I didn't know them before. I came to meet Harley and his group. I like the connection with GBF, to be honest, because that's my heart kind of has always been attached to them and what they do. I didn't know how much the GBF did until a few years ago. And the fact that they're supporting our GBF and our community and trying to do something with rental housing, it's entrepreneurial. I know that. I'm not a fool, but it's going to help a lot of people. And I think it's going to really help us all. So anyway, I'm happy for the partnership they have. And I guess I'm just going to say, for the record, I am in support of it. I think as a realtor, I'd like to see people have a place, a nice, pretty place to be when they get to that point they need to rent. And we just don't have any of it right now. So I hope I covered all the bases. I started reading and then I just went off on a tangent. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah.
Next, we have David Rollison. If you could state your name and address, please.
Indeed. Can anybody hear me? Working well?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. David Rollison, 107 Main Street East. I've lived at that location for 2 years now, in the immediate Grimsby area for about 17 years, and have a great affinity and love for this town ever since my wife and I moved here 17 years ago from Oakville. Lynn, you could not have said it better. You hit so many nails, so many key points there. A little bit of background about myself. I'm an urban planner by profession, by training. For a number of years, my specialty was urban design, and out of that grew a sustainable, I guess, side of my character. For the last 15, 16, 17 years, I've been involved in sustainable development, specifically solar and small urban wind. Ever since my experience with Grimsby over the last 15 or so years, there's been certain areas that have obviously been lacking as a result of the fire some years ago at the corner of Main and Elm. Or Main Ontario, that was one. Where the old theater used to be, which DeSantis has some very nice looking plans for, that's another. Myself as a planner, looking at what is planned, I want to go on record as saying I'm totally for it. What I have been taken aback by over the last year or two since moving here is a rather large number of people who quite interestingly lump, unfortunately, Castle Point Numa in along with a couple of the other larger Main Street East developments. In my humble opinion, you cannot lump all those in the same bucket. They are completely different scenarios. they're all looking at 6 to 7 floors. Yes, that's the only commonality. Downtown Grimsby, this area and specifically, has been lacking for some number of years. We got to face facts. It's used up. It is, the area as it is done, with the exception of the classic 1880s church and 13 Mountain Street. The area is virtually a wasteland, along with the area that burnt a few years ago and a few others. This is going to inject so much more life back into the community, as Lynn mentioned herself and several others, both her son Torrin and Stacey. A town, and as the HGTV show Hometown says, a town needs its people. And that's not just people with the $1 and $2 and $3 million homes around the periphery, hoping that they will come down to whether it's Luca's restaurant or the Indian Hut or wherever. It's not just those people. It's people in the downtown, living, renting, breathing the downtown and breathing life into it. That's what this town needs, in my opinion. And the people that are saying, oh, we don't want development, it can't be any more than 4 stories, 3 stories, or whatever, you're building towers. I've been in development for many, many years. For the city of Mississauga, for the city of Vaughan, 6 to 7 stories, people, is not a tower. LGM over the way is a tower. Azula Blue, or whatever the heck they call it, over by Grimsby on the Lake, which in some aspects is a nice development. They've done a nice job. Those are towers. This is not a tower. It's providing an opportunity to breathe new life into the community. Drew, you and your guys at SBN have done an amazing job designing this in conjunction with Harley's people. What it's going to, the new life it's going to breathe into the town is amazing, and I'm all for it. Can't say enough about it. The outdoor space, the ground floor community aspects of things, I myself can't see why people can't see that. I don't understand why they can't see that beneficial aspect of stuff. Thank you very much. Love it.
Thank you, David. Next, we have Sandra Yem. If you could state your name and your address, then your comments, please.
Good evening. Thanks, Councillor Ritchie. I want to address councillors, staff, and contributors. I'm Sandra Yem, and I speak for my family, and we reside on Mountain Street. And I really thank you for the opportunity and respectfully offer our comments on this application. We are strong supporters of Grimsby Town. We've been long-term residents and volunteer the art gallery. I'm a retired member of the board of directors of the Grimsby Benevolent Fund. We're members of the Garden Club, Historical Society, and we are involved with Grimsby Town. I want to echo some sentiments that have been already said, and I also want to state some other information. So the positioning of Grimsby on the lake and beside the escarpment is both a treasure and a challenge. Grimsby citizens do treasure the old houses and buildings, which are witnesses to the aesthetic and cultural history of Grimsby. These give us not only a connection to the past, but a sense of place. And that has been mentioned, a sense of place. It's only a guess, but I would say that sense of place, of living and raising a family in our small town, is so important to most citizens. However, to alter the harmony and aesthetics by introducing a high-rise development in downtown will almost certainly change the sense of place, and certainly will change the history going forward. One has a great view of the escarpment from the north on Christie Street. This view from the Queen E.W. Great Gateway showcases our town, nestled beside the escarpment. A view that for centuries Grimsby citizens and visitors have appreciated and prized. Visibility of this imposing high-rise is an important issue. Therefore, a visual assessment was required and conducted. In response, Niagara Region officials noted that some viewpoints used for this study could have been better located to reflect the full visual impact to the town. Even so, this assessment still reported a high visibility of this structure and blocking of the escarpment view when approaching from Christie Street Gateway and the downtown core. The citizens of Grimsby are invested to protecting the highly cherished views of the Niagara Escarpment. It's a celebrated UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve. The escarpment has always been an integral part and the vulnerability and the connecting thread for our community. And this proposal highlights the vulnerability of one of Grimsby's most prized geographical identities. Grimsby has lost the open view of the lake. Let us treasure and preserve our full view of the escarpment. The challenge for Grimsby Town is that our beauty and charm has attracted developers who, unfortunately, are not respectful of Grimsby's official plan and bylaws. These are statutes put in place over the years to protect what Grimsby citizens hold sacred. We must have the courage to meet that challenge, mindful of the future envisioned for our community. The Downtown Improvement and Revitalization Plan is being implemented right now. This planning document sets guidelines and specifies new builds as being low-rise in profile, matching the scale and massing of the historic main core. The plan states that downtown Grimsby is characteristic of a small town Ontario Main Street. The downtown core block is traditionally known as the block between Main Street, Mountain Street, and Elm Street. This small town flavor, ambiance, and harmony is a treasure that citizens love about our community. Let's preserve it. As noted, we have the municipality implementing this visual and aesthetic improvement plan for the downtown core. And contrasting to this is the application for a 7-story high-rise within this core, which will shadow Main Street and Mountain Street at times and block views of the escarpment where it matters. This proposal for a 7-story with a maintenance penthouse on top is in reality 8 stories high. And that is 6 stories higher than any dwelling or building in the downtown core. This structure will be about 31 meters or 100 feet high. We've been told that a 7-story build is called a medium rise. However, in Grimsby downtown, featuring only 2-story buildings, it is indeed a high rise. We do commend the architect who has provided an attractive plan. However, it contravenes the official plan and bylaws in many areas. We certainly support new builds with suitable size and location as set out in Grimsby protective statutes. Our neighbor, unfortunately, who's not able to be present tonight, moved here from Burlington in 2018. Danielle told us she moved to Grimsby to get away from the high-rise buildings. She wanted to raise her children in a small town with lots of green space. At the September open house for this applications, citizens echoed concerns about tenant parking. However, these concerns have not been further addressed by the applicant. Still, only 100 parking spaces are in the plans instead of 126 required in the bylaws. The applicant uses parking data from cities in the Greater Toronto Area, such as Mississauga and Hamilton, but no data for towns is shown in support of the parking ratio. Applicant conclusions are also based on transportation that may come to Grimsby in the future. With less than adequate parking spaces made available for tenants, the citizens of Grimsby will be impacted negatively. This application puts the onus on the town to provide the necessary parking facilities for the overflow of vehicles. Traffic congestion is an ongoing issue, especially where Mountain Street traverses through the downtown core. There is considerable large and noisy truck traffic on Mountain Street. The region of Niagara describes Mountain Street as having a substandard road allowance, meaning it is very narrow. And I can echo that because when we are on the sidewalk, you can reach your hand out and actually touch a vehicle. It's very, very uneasy when we are mowing our lawn at the front. The echoing of noise off of this structure will be of concern to neighbors and especially the planned public space. According to regional staff and our regional representative, there is no immediate plans to relocate truck traffic off of Mountain Street. The region has indicated that a mitigation plan for this structure will be required to decrease the significant loud road noise. Of further concern is the fact that two major stoplight intersections, Elm Street and Main Street, plus the entrance to Balsam Lane parking lot, plus the Food Basics lot, plus the proposed high-rise entrance, all converge within one short block on a major thoroughfare through downtown. Greater traffic congestion and a dangerous pedestrian area will be intensified. We ask if the infrastructure is conducive to a large build at this location.
Sandra?
Yes.
So that is the 10-minute buzzer there.
Can I have just two more minutes? I'm done.
I will. I think it's very important to hear everyone. So I'll give you 2 more minutes, and anybody else that goes over, I'll also allow 2 minutes for anyone else.
Thank you.
Continue. Thank you.
I'm almost finished here. So Grimsby's official plan limits the height of new buildings to 4 stories. There is precedent of a previous high-rise application in 2018 at the intersection of Elm and Main Streets downtown. It was approved at 4 stories. We are confident that council will weigh the impact that height, density, traffic, parking, and view blocking will have on the downtown core and Grimsby in general. I am reminded of many years ago when the council of the day approved the installation of a cell tower now located near the Grimsby Fire Station. After the installation, it was reported that some councillors remarked they didn't know it would be so high. Height cannot be ascertained from an architectural rendering. One must stand beside a 7+ high-rise to get the full impact of height. And I had asked at the September open house if there would be affordable housing. And I'm sad to say that Mr. Valentine told me himself that units would only be available at market pricing. The applicant is wanting many concessions for this proposed build. Perhaps it would work to swap concessions for affordable housing units, which are so desperately needed in the whole of Niagara. It was just a thought. On a more general note, while it's essential at this time to have the ability to communicate, I submit that citizens are quite disadvantaged through visual conferencing. And judging from past history and the interest shown during the 2018 high-rise application, tonight the council chamber would have been full of Grimsby citizens. The energy would be high, and perhaps to limit, but certainly to speak of their interest. We do hope council will take this under considerations. Decisions made by council will impact the future of our charming town. Respectfully submitted. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Sandra. Next, we have Robert Hatton. If you could state your name and address, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Robert Hatton, 31 Merritt Crescent, resident of Grimsby since 1987. For the record, I'm very much in favor of this long overdue development for our downtown. I will also, just for the courtesy of and saving the writers or your staff's risks from writing down, I'll submit my points so that they can just put them into their own document. They don't have to record this. Originally, I had many reservations until I read the Castle Point reports, did my own investigations, and even called upon the principals of the project to query them on, oh, and this is only gonna be 4 minutes, so Sandra gets her time back, to query them on their true intentions. Those meetings with the Castle Point NUMA people were very informative, not just for the content, but of the sincerity and thoroughness of the pre-work that they put into this project. I haven't seen any developer come forward and have done so much work in order to say, here's the vision, here's what we wish to do. So early in the game. My primary reason for being in favor is not what will happen if we do, but more of what happens if we don't build this transformative project. When I moved here in Grimsby 35 years ago, the downtown had more buildings than it does now, and the downtown was vibrant. What's changed? Well, a lot of things. We have lost and not replaced a movie theater, a bakery, 3 mixed-use stores that were burnt down in a fire about 4 years ago, the Husky gas station, and the commercial store at the corner of Main and Christie, the BMO parking lot area, had remnants of buildings back then. We now have vacancies along Main Street when few existed before, because downtown was a place to be. Most remaining stores that we have now are becoming more precarious due to fewer people who reside nearby, with essential enterprises still remaining, with few essential enterprises still remaining, notwithstanding Service Ontario, Giant Tiger, LCBO, and a few other businesses down there. On top of that, 13 Mountain has had a precarious past of restaurants and other businesses. And, with respect to our friends, the accounting people that are there now, thankful for that. And the 19 Elm Street Historic Church hasn't had a congregation in decades. The reality is downtown of Grimsby is withering. And each year downtown has fewer attractions. Why? We have fewer people down there, either as visitors or residents, with Costco and Grimsby on the lake as more appealing destinations. Now, I will concede at 5 p.m. we have it's drive-through congestion, but few stop and patronize the stores downtown. At 6 o'clock, the Main Street is empty. And part of that is due to few people reside there. So Sandra brought up an interesting point that I'd like to build on, because she had mentioned this aspect about, well, we need the heritage and character of old Main Street and downtown, or old Ontario downtowns. Well, what's happening with the old towns or the old main streets of old towns in Ontario? Well, they decay. There are many examples across of small towns across North America. In my hometown of Bancroft, whose downtown is 3 times as long as the one in Grimsby, retail shops have now been replaced by thrift stores, check cashing outlets, welfare offices, and meth clinics. And now their great expansion is meth shelters. I know I'm painting a dark picture here, but this is what has happened. The retail enterprises that were there relocated to where the people now live. All essential services, LCBO, license bureaus, government agencies, grocery stores, auto dealers, and even the local court moved only 3 kilometers away, the same distance as downtown is to Costco or Grimsby on the Lake. But it gutted the downtown. This same scenario, especially the meth clinics and treatment centers, are now popular in towns and cities like Peterborough and Mitchell, Port Hope, when no investment goes into a downtown area. And that is the reality of what's happening here. Residents bring life and enterprise to a neighborhood. No residents, no sustainable vibrancy. Having read all of the studies and reports and recommendations, I'm fully behind this. I believe the Castle Point Numa studies and the analysis they did are very credible. If there are any people who do oppose this, I ask, if not this, then what do you propose? So I wish to end on a positive note here. I was long ago, back in '93, Mayor Andrew Chuck tapped me to serve on the first GDAC in order to revitalize, because he got, and the council today got what was happening about, needing enterprise in the area. The first order of business was knowing what we wanted Grimsby like to be by 2020. This is 1993, so we're visioning to 2020, a year ago. That seemed like a long way off at the time, but it was last year. And on there, we had Wendy Watt and a few other people. We had the traditionalists that wanted to respect and maintain our heritage as their focal point. We also had their entrepreneurs who wanted growth. And of course, we don't see that debate happening today, but anyway, it happened back then. After long debates, we came up with our slogan, Heritage with Prosperity. It seems to me that this developer, Castle Point Numa, has fully embraced that notion of heritage with prosperity. We coined a quarter of a century ago with this very needed and appropriate development. So let's support this project, make our downtown become alive again. We owe it to ourselves, and I'm appreciative that Castle Point Numa is willing to take this on and transform Grimsby in a positive and meaningful way. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Next, we have Luca Vitali. If you could state your name and address, please, then your comments. Luca, are you there? All right, we will ask for Luca again at the end. I did see him earlier on, so I'm not sure where he's gone. Next is Rosanna Laporta. If you could state your name and address, please, for your comments. And I don't see Rosanna's name on the list either, so I will circle back to her at the end as well. And next we have Tony Josie. If you could state your name and address and then your comments, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Tony Josie, 19 Hunter Road, Grimsby. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Good, good. First of all, since I guess it's probably not normal, but I want to take a moment and say, thanks, Harley. Thanks for coming back home. It's so welcome to see the investment you made, not only in the buildings, and I have a couple biases being West Lincoln Memorial Hospital and Grimsby High School, being a born, raised, never left in town. It's ironic that I look at the screen tonight and I had the privilege of being chosen Chamber of Commerce president back in the early 80s. For those that are old enough to remember, that was recession time. I had Harley's grandmother on the board. I had Kevin's dad, Bert, on the board. We had a very exciting chamber. Back then, we would push the town to increase the density downtown. We believed in the 80s that we needed intensification to support our businesses. In the 90s, I was still on council, and I forget the date, sorry, getting old, but I would say mid-90s. We chose three, and with all due respect to Nick Anderchuk, who was the chair of the planning, Debbie Zimmerman, and I had the privilege of serving with those good people. We chose three areas in Grimsby, one being these two properties for a higher intensification. Okay, now understand this was mid-90s. We were thinking outside the box, and at that time we said 4 stories. Okay, now I have to be honest that the world has changed in 2022, and I have no issue supporting 6, 7, or 8 stories. And the way that Drew and his crew have laid this out, it's absolutely beautiful. A couple points of clarification. I had the privilege of serving on Rec and Parks with Sandra back in those years. But Sandra, I need to point out that my other dream is to remove truck traffic from Mountain Street. I was so happy last week to see the Niagara Region budget meeting where I pressed local councillors to make sure that the EA study for a mountain access route, which could very well be Bartlett Avenue, which will connect Niagara West up to West Lincoln. And it's going to be a $40 million job. I've already met with the Minister of Transport through Sam, our MPP. We're encouraging the province to put budget money set aside in years to come, but the region has to do the first step, which is an EA study. This will make this project that much more appealing once we can reduce the truck traffic, but it's going to take a bit of time. The other thing, Sandra, the definition of downtown. We have the DIA area, which is smaller than what? Downtown back in my day, we had extended it out to Robinson Street. And I remember Ross Robbins, and that was back about 40 years ago. We convinced Ross to build the Robinson Street apartments, which is higher than the 4 that was allowed, okay? And even before I got on council, I remember the crying for Slessor. Now everyone in this town drives by Slessor on Livingston, and with the proper setback, similar to this proposal with the setback behind the historical buildings. If you sat in Canadian Tire, take a minute and look up at Slessor. That was 8 stories developed in the 60s and 70s when everyone squawked that we didn't have a fire truck to get that high. Okay, well, this is 2022. I have grandchildren that I want to be able to allow to grow in this town. My wife and I may want to sell our house someday and go to an apartment like about 10 or 20 of my friends. By the way, Braymar's within the downtown core and behind the old Tim Hortons. And you might want to count the stories there, Sandra, but that was built in the 60s and 70s. And guess what? It exceeded the 4 stories. And you know what? Ronnie and his wife and the dancers and a whole bunch of old Grimsby people sold their homes and were fortunate to go there. Well, I tried getting a unit in there for a family member, okay? And you know, there's 65 people on the waiting list. Now, that was 3 weeks ago, okay? And these are people that have born, raised, lived in this town, and they want to stay downtown. One other aspect I challenged the town, and Kevin, you might want to take back. First of all, Kevin and others, downtown parking. I was on the north side parking committee. I was on the south side committee. I remember chasing business owners. We had one guy downtown that had 11 mortgages, and I had to drive back and forth to Toronto to get him to sign the agreement so we could build the parking on the south side. Okay, so I lived and breathed parking in Grimsby for many years. It's still a concern of mine, but life is changing a little, and the provincial formula for parking, I think it failed us in Grimsby by the Lake, seriously. But I asked, and maybe Harley has to spend some more money, but if you look, I drove behind Slessor's today, and I don't know how many units are in Slessor's, and it was 415, and I don't know if they're still all at work, but there's only so many parking spots in Slessor's. And I happen to know a few people that are in wheelchairs that are shopping and they don't have vehicles. And then I go over to, I went over to the Robinson Street Apartments. We were planning a reunion until COVID hit and one of our members were there, but I look at the amount of parking spots for that building and look at Braemar. How many parking spots versus how many units in Braemar? It's my humble opinion that for 72, 80 rental units, now there's the retail aspect. Okay, you're going to have to make sure you got lots of parking to support the retail aspect, but the actual living aspect, I don't think they all have cars. But you know, there's lots of engineers and numbered people out in the world that can look at that. I just say it's something to look at. But look forward to truck traffic. Thanks again, Harley. I just have to say that your grandmother would be extremely proud. She was a big fan of supporting downtown, had a business on Main Street for many years. And also she offered her house for our family wedding pictures when I got married. So just to be a little biased, but thanks for investing in this town, having faith in the town, and it's long overdue. It's been 30, 40 years to see this kind of investment and opportunity in town. So thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Next, we have Laura Noble. If you could state your name, your address, and then your comments, please.
Hello. Hi, I'm Laura Noble Volkmuth. I live on 103 Ridge Road West, and I absolutely adore a small town just for the nature of listening to everyone's submissions today. I will not keep this very long at all, but a couple of my points have already been mentioned. The environmental idea of protecting our green belt and using our intensification for downtown is first and foremost for me as well. Moving away from thinking about where we're going to park our cars to having people not have a car is, I think, looking forward, not backwards. Also, this idea that our view into town is beautiful is not particularly appropriate when I think of the parking lot we look at Food Basics is our welcoming to Grimsby, and I've never really understood why we don't beautify that in itself. So the idea that we can have an architect come into town and be part of a development project is, perhaps people don't realize that there's a difference between architecture and draftspeople, and a lot of developers just use the drafts drawing as opposed to taking all of the consideration of what they're actually building. And I think the idea that we are paying attention to architecture for the first time in Grimsby is super exciting, and I can't state how positive that is for us as a small town. My last point, I grew up in Dundas, and as soon as Amica built their downtown development for Dundas, the amount of people and money that was generated for the downtown just skyrocketed. So if we're nervous about what bringing more people into downtown will do, I think that's not really looking at the big picture of what it can bring for us. So I'm gonna sign off now, but everyone made fabulous points. Harley's passion for this project is only gonna tell us it's gonna succeed. He obviously has a personality that's very welcome in Grimsby, and yeah, go for it. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next, we have Mark Chindemi. If you could state your name, your address, and then your comments, please.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Chindemi. So 7 Main Street East, and then Shauna is, of course, 5 Main Street West. So White Rhino Gifts and New Art Center. Okay, nice. I'm going to talk a little bit in the beginning, and I think Shauna is going to speak for the both of us. Both of us were approached and invited to speak on this, not only on behalf of business owners downtown, but as artists. So I wanted to take an approach as an artist. And first of all, I appreciate all of the things that have been said tonight. It's really, really like making a difference and giving it a little bit more dimension. But when looking at, some of the development and some of the projections and the look visually, it makes me happy. What I like that I see there is the greenery. I love the fact that there's that outdoor space where people can sit and gather and connect. And I also, what was mentioned to me when we were asked to speak on this, about this whole project, was the possibility of arts and community. And that makes me excited because I think that really brings light into any town. It brings culture, it brings understanding and equality. I'm concerned about the 7 or 8 stories. And I wanted to make a point, and this is just my personal opinion, that although I appreciate people's concerns of housing, I don't like to cloud my judgment. And I ask you to keep your mind open on things that are now, the crises that exist now. We need to make a decision sometimes looking generations ahead. So if you don't want to see an 8-story building, that's still going to be there. I have a big heart for the people that live here and the concern they have for people. I think that's beautiful. But we cannot stagnate on making a decision based on that. But what I do want to say again is, I agree. I think the approach in this has been not only professional, it's been integral. You're right. All the things that you were saying about the way they went about proposing this, just even the opening, it's really giving us a view in. I sense the honesty and the heart in this. And of course, this is coming from someone who was born and raised here as well, as are a lot of you. From a business standpoint, and of course, I'm going to let the lovely Shauna take over. Yeah, I want more people here too. I agree. I think anyone can agree on that. Parking is a concern, but that would not stagnate as a reason for me not to be in support of this. Any town deserves new life because life is always growing. So I want to close by saying I just appreciate everybody taking the time to give their opinion and their educated opinions to open my mind on some things that I was uncertain of. And I'm just going to turn it over to Shauna because she's probably going to articulate it a lot better, but thank you so much.
Do you want me to wait, Kevin, for you to formally say my name, or should I just go ahead and?
Yeah, Mark actually said it for you. If you want to say your
that's
name
right.
again and your address, that's great. And proceed with your comments. Thank you, Shauna.
Okay. So Shauna Daly, I own Art New Art Center downtown at 5 Main Street West. So I would like to start my portion of our contribution this evening with a poem. So I'm going to read the poem called "The Road Not Taken" by Robert Frost. So he says, quote, "Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." End quote. So when we were asked to speak at this open house, I was really thinking about how we were going to come to it. And as Mark mentioned, we are both artists in the community and business owners. And, you know, the more I started thinking about it, this idea of authenticity started surfacing in my mind and in our thoughts. And in our experience as human beings, when we stand in authenticity for the greater good of all people, our endeavors don't require any forced energy. We don't need to ask people to stand up for our cause because people will want to join willingly. We don't need to bang down doors, so to speak, because any doors we face open with little to no effort. And wherever we go, we are always welcomed and pleased with smiles and open arms. So when we think about this idea of authenticity and Grimsby authenticity in terms of this proposed development, these are the things that came up for us. The green technology and materials said to be utilized throughout the infrastructure of this development, to me and to us, is situated in authenticity. The respect for the land and the preservation and creation of natural spaces that are indicated for the project via the landscape architecture are tethered in authenticity. The providing of open community space for the use, development, and/or expansion of resources that support the arts are wholly grounded in authenticity. The providing of affordable rental housing has authenticity fundamentally woven right through its core. The protection and maintenance of the original historic buildings on the site is respectfully authentic. As mentioned, we own 2 arts-focused downtown businesses, and the idea of bringing more residents to the core potentially means more patrons to our businesses. And as business owners, one might think the more the merrier. However, our current reality is we don't even have a parking space for ourselves near our businesses. We try to park where we can that's away from our place of work, so we're not taking up critical spaces for visitors and patrons coming to the downtown. If I only thought about the potential increase in sales from hundreds of new residents moving to the area without thinking of all the people that this endeavor will impact, we would be stepping outside of our own authenticity. Where we feel the developer may have stepped out of authenticity for the greater good of all with this project is the proposal of 7 stories plus a penthouse maintenance level. A towering 7-foot development in the middle of downtown Grimsby doesn't feel Grimsby authentic to us. And while we support responsible development, this piece doesn't have the same authentic feel as the rest of the proposed development. And as mentioned in previous open houses, there are real issues that residents have brought to the surface, such as the problem of mass shadow casting on the surrounding businesses and residents during certain daytime, the traffic flow on Mountain Street and Elm, sightlines and views of the escarpment, insufficient parking, etc. And while I believe there has been semi-comparable data provided to offset these factors, these are real concerns for real people, and these issues do not lie in the realm of greater good for them. We feel this is a wonderful opportunity for Grimsby. It has the potential to enrich the lives of so many people. The idea of cultivating this beautiful complex that has the potential to revitalize the downtown core is such an exciting possibility. Bringing the arts to people in a larger capacity, partnering with the GBF, and setting a standard for future developers when it comes to ecologically conscious and sustainable infrastructure are all honorable endeavors, Harley. So thank you. We admire what you're planning here. Our only request is that the developer stands fully in authenticity for the full scope of this project and kindly consider 4 stories as sufficient for the proposal of their development. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna, and thank you, Mark, for your comments. Next, we have Veronica Sherwa. If you could state your name and your address and then your comments, please.
My name is Veronica Sherwa, 51 Redhaven. I'm a Grimsby resident and a business owner. I'm also a member of a Grimsby community group called Grimsby Community Talk. I'm here tonight delegating on behalf of the residents of Grimsby who've made it clear that they are adamantly opposed to the Wolverton development at 7 stories. From the online open house and emails, you have heard the consistent message from residents as well as business owners who have concerns about such density and mass on this particular site. Concerns relating to greater safety issues, traffic congestion, parking problems, lack of infrastructure, and shadows, just to name a few. They're also starting to feel that our designated intensification set is rapidly exceeding our policing services. Grimsby residents support the development of this property at 4 stories or less. Upon hearing of this planned meeting, I created a poll asking for Grimsby residents to provide feedback in regards to their level of support for 4 stories max or 7 stories on this particular site. Within 36 hours, 307 Grimsby residents voted. Only 11 supported a 7-story property. 242 people supported development of maximum 4 stories. 54 people said they did not want to see any more development on this site at all. This tells us that 96.4% of Grimsby residents polled support development of 4 stories or less at this site. Support for this development at 4 stories max is the consensus, myself included. I would also like to point out that the businesses who have delegated and or offered letters of support have not supported 7 stories specifically. They've supported the builder, the need for rental housing, and or some development on this property in general. For full transparency, I ask that in your follow-up planning report, that if you have businesses or organizations that support 7 stories specifically, that every individual business or organization name is listed, stating their support for 7 stories specifically. If these businesses or organizations are in the DIA or Grimsby Chamber, I ask that they be individually listed as well. Residents have supported these businesses and organizations for years, including through a pandemic, and are curious who are publicly offering their support for 7 stories. Lastly, I would like to address the use of rental housing as a justification for this project. This proposal is asking for 74 units. If we deleted 3 stories from the project to cap it at 4 stories, we would have roughly 25 fewer rental units in this building. As of yesterday, there were 71 condo units for lease advertised in Grimsby alone. Half of these were through realtors, and half of these were private agreements. We have more than enough rentals in Grimsby to meet the demand. Additionally, there is no reference anywhere that suggests these are affordable units. With condos in Grimsby renting anywhere between $2,000 to $4,000 for a 1-bedroom unit before utilities are included, it would be hard to say that this has added affordability and helped young people or lower income earners secure a stable home. According to StatsCan, 19% of the condos, townhomes, and homes in the Grimsby on the Lake community are rentals. This has not created any stability or affordability in our Grimsby market. Please refrain from using rental housing as a justification for overdevelopment. In conclusion, I will finish with a quote from Castle Point NUMA's website in regards to what they call our approach. It states, "Our work is distinguished by an unwavering commitment to community, collaboration, and reverence for the people and neighborhoods we serve." I ask that Castle Point NUMA, the Town Planning Department, and Town Council hold true to these words. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Jami Noor. Don't know if I saw them on the list. So again, Jami, if you're there. If not, I'll circle back at the very end, give another opportunity. So we'll move on to David Boersma. If you state your name, your address, and then your comments, please.
Hi, I'm David Boersma. I'm neighbor to the Wolverine House. My property is located at 16 Mountain Street, which is kitty corner to the proposed development. I've seen the details of the proposed rental apartments for the Wolverine and am satisfied with all aspects of it, whether it's height, the massing, the setbacks for the location in Grimsby. I see a lot of housing developments in my line of work, and clearly there's been a lot of consideration and thought put into this by Harley and his group. The design makes it well suited for its location. It is my view and opinion that the location and proposed height is ideal for the neighborhood. Once occupied, its residents will have a beautiful building to call home, and the Wolverine will contribute positively to revitalizing downtown. Having lived around the world and traveled to many different cities and towns, for there to be a thriving retail and restaurant industry, there has to be a sufficient amount of urban density to fill the seats of the restaurants and get people through the doors of the retail shops. I think this has been something that downtown Grimsby has struggled with, given that we've seen businesses open and close within a couple years. With the introduction of the rental apartments at the Wolverton, residents will be able to step out of the lobby, walk 1 to 2 blocks, and have a wonderful meal at Casa Toscana or some new restaurant that may open, or engage in some retail therapy at Donna's shop. This is a huge selling feature for the Wolverton and also for any business looking to open in downtown Grimsby. Given that Grimsby has not seen a purpose-built rental house or housing development in more than 40 years, and there being a lack of apartment-style housing in the core close to Main Street, I think this is a perfect opportunity to provide housing for either young professionals or retirees who are looking to downsize. I know there's been a couple of people who have commented about a lack of parking or parking issues. I think one of my comments is that some of those people have no parking for the real estate that they're either leasing or own. So I don't understand how Harley should be responsible to provide more parking to alleviate something that's their own issue. One of the other things was that some people have tossed around the idea of affordable housing and that he should be providing affordable housing. I don't understand how someone in the private sector is now supposed to engage in affordable housing. Maybe we should call on Justin Trudeau to provide some funds for affordable housing, especially since he's allowed over 400,000 immigrants into the country every year. So that's really caused the housing crisis that we're currently facing. So I think, by allowing for some intensification in the core of Grimsby is going to allow opportunities more so for retirees who want to downsize and stay and be within walking distance of grocery stores, restaurants, and other little shops and cafes. So that's all I have to say for now. And I support Harley and the development at the Wolverton.
Thank you, David. So that is the end of the list that I have here for members of the public. I did read 3 names out and they weren't present with us. So I will circle back and just ask those people if they're here or not. The first one's Luca Vitali.
Councillor Ritchie, I
Yes.
was in touch with Luca. He had a family emergency. He had to leave. He wanted me to tell you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Alrighty.
Next is Rosanna Laporta. And I don't see her name on the list. And lastly is Jamie Noor. And I don't see anything or hear anything from him. So at this time, we do have several councillors in attendance. I'd like to open it up if they have any questions of clarity. I want them to remember that they will have opportunities at later on where they can ask more in-depth questions. But at this time, if they have any questions of clarity, feel free to ask. Councillor Sharp.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair, I'll just make a quick comment first. Harley and I are nearly the same age, and so we went to high school together. We have a lot of common friends, and I don't want to let my affinity for Harley cloud my judgment in the downtown. But I do have some questions about so when Harley said earlier that there was 74 market rate units. What is a market rate? Is there, if maybe Harley, you might have some expertise on this, or if not, our town staff might know. What's the market rate for a 1 or 2 or 3 bedroom in our area?
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. I can speak directly to that. Market rate is it would be a valuation on a price for anywhere from a bachelor unit to a 3-bedroom unit, which we're offering here today. And that market rate would be set at the time that unit comes to market. So I can't speak towards what the market value is of this future for this future rental program. However, what I can say about market rental housing is that The security that market rental housing brings is when you enter into a residential building that's purpose-built rental, your rental rate is set at that time of occupancy market rate. It can then only be increased year over year by 1.5%. That is something very unique to a purpose-built rental building. Typically what we see and what is often heard about some of the pains of renting in purpose-built condo building is that there's no security of tenancy. At any time, that owner or investor can move into that unit and can convert it into their own dwelling and then can go sell it. And also sometimes it's being manipulated for capturing an updated market rental rate. So that is my very loose description about what market rental housing is. And I'd be happy to, at a later date, provide more information on that.
Okay. Thanks, Harley.
Thank you, Harley. Just Councillor Sharp, if I may interject for a second here. I stated at the beginning that that we'd go through every single participant in the open house, and all the questions would be the questions would be held to the end where staff and everyone can answer. So I'm going to ask that we do the same thing for the councillors during the public open house. So you have questions, the staff is writing them down and they will answer them all at the end. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Continue, Councillor Sharp.
Yeah, so I'm on like Kijiji right now, looking at apartments for rent in Grimsby, and I'm seeing a 1-bedroom at Slessor for $17.50 per month, and a 1-bedroom at Lake House for $18.50 per month. And I'm seeing the cheapest I can find is a basement apartment for $1,600 per month. I see 2 bedrooms at Aquazul for $2,400 per month, and I see a 3-bedroom in Stony Creek. Mind you, this is a townhouse for $2,750 per month. And I'm thinking of Stacey Elia's 30% affordable rent, and I looked it up online, and that's 30% of their gross before tax income. And so that puts these 1-bedrooms, I mean, you'll need to make between $65,000 and $75,000 a year to afford that. I mean, household income, so I guess you could have 2 incomes, but they're high. And so I just want to, will there be any affordable income? Like we talked, a lot of the people who commented talked about affordable rentals downtown, and I don't find the market to be very affordable right now in Grimsby. And so I'm concerned that there is no affordable housing in this. So I want to note that, and if the staff could address our downtown affordable housing issues, that would be appreciated. The other things I have a list here I'm reading. I'm just going through. So I just want to clarify, there is a deficiency in parking and the minimum parking. How many spaces is this building deficient? I guess that can be answered later. Is this building considered a residential building? And like my comments to that are that, you know what, I'll save them till we have the council meeting. Yeah, so then the other thing is on downtown, so we describe in our official plan, we describe the heights of buildings. The high rise is over 12 stories, a mid rise is 5 to 11 stories, and low rise is maximum 4 stories. And our downtown has a maximum of 4 stories. And so it's my opinion that downtown is intended for low rise construction. We went to a considerable extent to ensure that there was no more than 4 stories at the Century Condos, which is just 250 meters to the northeast of this property. We had more than 250 residents at the public meeting. We actually had to close the door for fire code reasons. And most of them spoke against allowing more than 4 stories. So my question is, why would we allow 4 stories in such close proximity to the area where we so adamantly, we went to a considerable extent. There was quite a bit of legal cost, and then the developer ended up having to pay our legal cost when we negotiated for the final settlement of 4 stories with 100% parking. So I question what's different over here? Like, this is, in my opinion, I mean, you can see the two from each other. And so I don't really consider it a different zone. And is it a different zone, or is this the same zoning as the Century condo? So if you could write that one down, I appreciate that. Then the last thing I wanted to say is just about the Winston Road neighborhood. When we approved that, first we saw Lake House and Aqua Blue approved at 4 and 6 stories, which is not much different than this. And then we saw LJM be approved at 9 stories. Then LJM phase 2 was 15 stories. And then Odyssey at 20 stories. And Aquazul at 10 stories. Fifth Wheel at 22, 18, 16, 14, and 12 stories. Finally, Casablanca Hotel at 12 and 19 stories. If we set the same precedent downtown, what stops the growth from exceeding our maximum height everywhere downtown? And I truly believe that we're going to get downtown redeveloped. I truly believe that we're going to have residential in the downtown. But what stops, since we have our official plan at 4 stories, if we break that, then we set a precedent. And what stops us from having to follow that everywhere? And I think 4 stories is the max. But that's all I have for my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Vardy.
Thank you. I just have a few questions. One, I'd like to know what studies have been done with respect to traffic flow, because that's it's already a very congested intersection, and I'd like to see or learn more about how traffic will be moving in and out of there. My next question is, what guarantees are there that this will, with all due respect, that you don't change your mind and say, oh, it's going to be a condo now, and not be a rental? Is there anything, and this is really for our planning folks, that that sort of makes this legally binding as a rental as we move through the process? And my last question, I guess, is for our planning people as well. Have the heritage buildings, the 2 of them, have they been designated as yet? So those are my 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vardy. Councillor Cadwell.
Thank you, Chair. This time I don't have any questions. I did take a lot of notes down, and in corresponding to that, I want to thank the residents, all the residents who commented. You took a lot of time. Your comments were very well listened to, I'm sure, by staff and by myself and by councillors. So thank you very much for the residents who participated in this public meeting. And I want to thank Harley for bringing this forward, this type of development, and to his planning staff. And also I want to thank town staff. So I will have questions in the future. Again, I did take a lot of notes down, and I look forward to the process moving forward and hearing from our staff, and then as we can get to making the final decision to this. So that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cadwell. Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I guess I think to help clarify it, as Councillor Sharp mentioned, there are 3 different distinct zones in the downtown. It would be helpful if staff or the applicant can put the zoning map up, maybe to show that this one is in a different area than the downtown Main Street. It's a downtown intensification. And that I think when the official plan was done in 2012, there was the 3 zones: a downtown Main running along Main, then the downtown intensification tucked in around the Village Inn and this area, and then around the outskirts is the downtown transition. And there's some areas that are north of Main that also are 6 stories that are permitted. And just maybe to clarify that the downtown intensification area where this fits into also includes the Village Inn area and exactly where those boundaries are, so people understand that. I think in 2012 that there was it was one of 2 intensification areas, as well as the Winston Road neighborhood, that were put in place to guide where the future development and growth should go. the other thing that came out of that is the Winston Road neighborhood is actually even a different zoning than the downtown. It's got its own specific mixed use high density zoning. So it's kind of got its own little secondary plan that it's covered under, which is unique for the growth down at this end. I just would like to ask the applicant if within the official plan under the downtown, under compatible development 3.5.6.5 C, it states new buildings shall be designed at a height and scale which is compatible with the surrounding area and in conformity with the policies of this plan. Specific consideration shall be given to massing options that establish an appropriate relationship to the surrounding built form. I would just ask if the applicant could respond to that and explain how the proposed development meets that section of the official plan. That would be my question. I appreciate that a lot of effort and community consultation has gone into this, and I think that they've reached out to try to answer any questions that the community has, and I really appreciate that in working as well to design something that allows for that green space, the green roof, the environmental consideration, sustainability. I think that's great, and the heritage, incorporating the heritage. I think we need to be really respectful though when we get to the urban design stage, and I hope that they do the design charrette with the region, similar to what they did with the DeSantis property too. I think that some of the comments in the reports did indicate that some further refinement of the facades and the materials that are going to be used for the development with respect to the setbacks, as I think one of the speakers tonight for the applicant noted, was those setbacks, and to allow different building materials to complement the heritage features of the buildings that are in front of it, not replicate, but to ensure there's good compatibility and blending. So I'll just leave that one question for the applicant, and I would hope that we'll, as we see this, should it move to site plan, that there's a real attention to the heritage components as preservation as much as possible, and to the a respectful facade compatibility with the heritage features. Thank you, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Councillor Bothwell. And you go through and ask whoever. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Walter. Sorry.
I'm muted. Yeah.
Yeah.
I muted myself. Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify the next steps in the process here. So now I'm going to turn over to the Assistant Director of Planning. They've gone through and they've taken notes. I would ask that any questions from the public that they've written down, if you go through them first and then proceed after that to questions or the best you can, or direct people to answer those questions. Thank you. So Walter, if you may.
Muted again. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll attempt to answer the question as best I can. I didn't really hear too many questions from members of the public. There was lots of opinion one way or the other in support or against the development one way or the other. We did take note of those opinions. This meeting has been recorded, so we will address any opinions that have been lodged at this meeting and in writing through our staff report. With regard to some of the questions that were raised by some members of council, Councillor Sharp asked about market rates for rental units. We actually do have a definition of affordable and what is affordable and how it's defined. We actually do have a definition of affordable in our official plan, and I'll just briefly read that. There are two sections of the definition. One is in case of ownership, and the other is for rental accommodation. It's defined as, in the case of quote, in the case of a rental housing, the least expensive of a unit for which the rent does not exceed 30% of gross annual household income for low and moderate income households, or a unit for which the rent is at or below the average market rent of a unit in the regional market area. That's the definition of affordable housing in the Grimsby official plan. Deficiency in parking. Unfortunately, I was taking notes for all the other comments. I haven't had an opportunity to address that. I'll defer that question to Adam. If you could do that once I'm completed, I'll move on to you to answer that question. Residential building, is this a residential building? The question was, that depends on whether or not it's a question of the building code, or if it's if we take into account the existing buildings together with the new construction together as a structure. It will be a mixed use building because there's community uses proposed, there's residential uses proposed, and there's commercial uses proposed in the Wolverton House itself. No more than 4 downtown. Councillor Bothwell, I believe, answered that question. There are different policies for the Main Street proper section of the downtown. So downtown Main Street designation. There is a policy that states that 4 stories is the maximum height for that area. However, on either side of downtown, north of Main Street and south of Main Street, the policies permit 4 stories, but it states that up to 6 stories may be permitted subject to viewshed studies. And specifically on the south side of Main Street, the viewshed study must be considered and analyzed by the Niagara Escarpment Commission, particularly considering views of the escarpment from prominent public spaces. Councillor Vardy asked about traffic study. Yes, a traffic study is a major component of this project. This is something that will be considered by our Public Works Department. We have a traffic expert on our Public Works Department who will provide an analysis of the traffic study that's submitted. What stops the conversion? If the rental rate is less than a certain, or if the vacancy rate is less than a certain amount within a municipality, municipality can refuse the conversion to condominiums. A specific application, a Planning Act application, would have to be made to the town. The town will have to take that specifically into account if an application is made on any rental property for a conversion to condominium ownership. And one of the principal considerations the municipality must take into account is what the vacancy rates are within the municipality. That essentially determines whether or not there is a healthy rental unit supply within the municipality by looking at the vacancy rate and what it is. The heritage designation, simply the answer is no. If the buildings aren't designated, they are listed in the Heritage Act, which means that there is demolition protection. But there is a request or a recommendation by the Heritage Committee to have the buildings designated and have the applicants agree to designate or to not disagree with the designation or object to the designation of the buildings. Compatibility, again, so that was a question by Councillor Bothwell. I'll defer that to Harley's team to address. And if I could go to Adam now to address specifically the parking question. Adam?
Yep, so as far as the requirements for parking, based on the rates for residential dwelling units for apartment buildings, the required parking requirement based on the 73 units would be 110 parking spaces for residents. This would include, well, residents and visitors to the apartment portion, and then an additional 14 for any commercial uses there, so 124 total.
Great, thank you, Adam. And then I think there was a compatibility question if Harley or his team could answer that question. I believe Walter wanted to just reiterate what the issue was, and maybe if you guys could answer, that'd be great.
Harley, maybe I can, this is Councillor, I believe the question from Councillor Bothwell.
That's correct.
So it was a absolutely appropriate question because I think it's the root of how a 6-story, or within the OP, a 6-story or a 7-story building can be accommodated on this site. First and foremost, there are 2 frontages, and we have, the building takes a slightly different approach to each frontage. The typical measures, I'd say the urban design approach to assessing how to transition or fit within the different contexts are through measuring the street wall height. So street wall height is the height of the building as it relates to or addresses the street, or how the building fits within an angular plane from generally assessed from the opposite side of the street right of way. So the other side of the property, just to look at a standard definition of mid-rise building that's already been assessed within Grimsby's official plan. That's how the kind of 5 to 12 story overall height, or 5 to 9 story overall height was determined to be the mid-rise category. On this site, I think it's important to note the building was intentionally held about 70 feet back, I believe, from the street on the Mountain Street side. And I'm not certain if that's been made fully clear to residents that the taller portion of the building is a full 70 feet back from the street, in order to assure that not just sits within the angular plane, but it's well underneath the angular plane to assure that there's lots of room for both green space on the front of the building and public space, but also so that the reading from the street is the heritage buildings first and then the building beyond. And that was both conscious in intent to make sure that the heritage buildings were given prominence on the site, or maintained as with their prominence was maintained on the site, but also to really mitigate any potential impacts. And you would have seen in the shadow impact analysis that we shared that the difference between the as of right shadows, what would be permitted under the current policy framework, we showed it at 4 stories. What would be permitted under the current policy framework, assuming 6 stories that could be achieved with an acceptable visual impact assessment, would have shown that there's negligible, if any, difference between the shadow impacts off-site resulting from development of this site. On the Elm Street facade, and I think the comment was probably largely directed towards Elm Street as a very different character, as you know, in that there's a variety of different building forms as you move towards Main Street, obviously more commercial buildings, and in the area adjacent to Wolverine Hall, more house form houses on the south side or on the north side of the street. Certainly more primarily commercial uses, not residential uses within those buildings. But what was intended within the transition, and transition just speaking to how the taller forms of the building step down towards the street, was to create a well-defined 4-story street wall within the intent of the official plan policies to have that 4-story reading at the street, and then the upper story stepping back 3 meters and then 5 meters at the stories above. So we have a strong street wall that is, at or just a little bit below the existing height of Wolverine Hall, which is quite a tall building on its own. And then terracing back towards the taller portions of the building at the back, and intent to have on those upper terraces planting and really outdoor amenity spaces or outdoor living spaces for the residents within the building. So those on the 2 public frontages, those were the critical considerations. And I mentioned in the earlier part of the presentation, there's been some additional there was some additional intent to break down the massing of the building, both to allow for additional steps in transition, specifically from Mountain Street, and in a similar way, the northern edge of the block adjacent to the driveway entrance to the building, to really transition the building down in a very abrupt and clear way to, again, really preserve the prominence of Wolverton House. There was a further question, somewhat related, about the relatability of the heritage elements and the designation of the buildings. And I suppose we're still very early to speak to exactly how the material resolution will resolve, except to say what we've been working on with heritage staff, and we have a really excellent heritage architecture team built into the team we've put together, ERA architects, and there's a number of people from ERA here tonight. the key for us isn't essentially mimicking or transitioning or trying to replicate the heritage facades or to create, in a way, a kind of simulation of a heritage building, but it's really to create a kind of celebration of and a contrast to, so you can read clearly the approach to heritage. And then we want to make sure where the two buildings meet, that we're providing a really clear distinction. In our case, what we're trying to do is introduce really small atrium elements, glass elements, so that the building entrances are in those moments, so that you get to really experience both of the heritage buildings in the round, and that they're visually and materially distinct from the new building on the site. But at this stage, it's still being resolved. We're very much in design, and we'll go through a separate process with town staff as we go into site plan. And I to the point about the workshop sessions with regional staff, I think that's something that's been discussed, and there's a willingness to, of course, take that collaborative design approach in order to ensure that we're achieving that kind of balance successfully. Harley, I'm not certain if you had anything to add to that.
No, I think that's great, Drew. Thanks.
Thank you, Drew. So at this time, I believe all the questions have been answered to the public. If not, if you want to raise your hand, and if you don't feel your question was addressed, I'll give you this opportunity now to speak. And seeing and hearing none, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation in the public meeting. The consultants and staff will take back your feedback. And if you have any comments or anything else that you'd like to, please contact staff at planning@grimsby.ca. If you have any additional comments or questions about the proposal this evening, and I will now end the meeting as this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.